Hello! When I woke up today, I had never actually heard anyone defend trigger warnings. But then I found Laci Green.
Oh hey babes, Laci here. It is a sweaty LA night, the perfect time to talk about trigger warnings. There's been a bunch of, verbal vomit about trigger warnings the past year or so. Most recently, the University of Chicago released this letter to incoming freshmen. They said, quote, "Our commitment to academic freedom means we don't support so-called trigger warnings, we don't cancel invited speakers because their topics might prove controversial, and we don't condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces where individuals can retreat from ideas and perspectives at odds with their own."
Let's get that paper back on the screen. Now, I want you to notice that the only thing they wrote about trigger warnings is that they do not support trigger warnings. They did not say why they do not support trigger warnings, they only said that they do not support them. I do not know what Laci is going to do here, but when she makes a video where she's going to defend trigger warnings as a concept, then citing someone who's not actually making any argument against it is a waste of time.
The problem with this statement,
they never tried to explain what a trigger warning is. They never told us what they think a trigger warning is. How can they be wrong? How can their statement be wrong when they never try to explain it?
The problem with this statement is the same problem with a lot of critiques of trigger warnings on the internet, and that's not what a trigger warning is. It is not a retreat from ideas and perspectives.
That statement was about safe spaces. You are defending trigger warnings against arguments laid against safe spaces.
If it is actually being used in that way, then the trigger warning is being misused.
Correct. The problem with trigger warnings is not that they are used as a way of retreating from ideas and perspectives that you disagree with. The problem is that they are used as a way of hiding yourself from certain topics because those topics will give you bad feelings. An example of those topics could be discussions about rape or war. Now, if you are unable to discuss certain problems like rape or war, because those problems will give you bad feelings, then you will not be able to find solutions to those problems. If there is one thing we do not need, then it is the future generations being unable to find solutions to problems that gives them bad feelings.
I first became aware of trigger warnings when I was in college, but it was not in class, it was during an internship. I was working with domestic abuse survivors at a state agency. Trigger warnings exist to give someone a little bit of a buffer before confronting them with information, graphics, whatever that may be deeply painful and upsetting. They are specifically used in populations which may be experiencing higher levels of trauma to help them cope, compartmentalize, and keep moving forward.
Trigger warnings are being used in classrooms among normal students. Don't try to frame this as a way of protecting rape survivors.
Now, I think where things got a little bit more complex and thus more controversial is when they were translated for usage in the blogosphere. Now you have online communities that want very specific trigger warnings, people talking about very specific things. I don't think it's up to me to say, people overuse trigger warnings or whatever. But I do think the demand for really specific trigger warnings in very general settings has been used to undermine the legitimacy and value of trigger warnings as a whole. Another observation worth noting is that trigger warnings are part of a broader ideology where people's experiences and people's needs are taken into account. It's more of a nurturing culture.
Yes. Trigger warnings is a part of an ideology that puts people's feelings as the highest priority. It's a part of an ideology who protects you against anything offensive. It's a part of an ideology that protects you from reality. Why are you admitting this?
Trigger warnings and the culture that surrounds them runs directly contradictory to hyper masculinity, where everyone's tough and we make fun of people who are weak little pussy crybabies.
Why should I not make fun of weak little crybabies? Being a weak little crybaby is not a good thing.
The backlash to trigger warnings isn't necessarily sexist, but I think that it is fueled by sexism.
Why? How is trigger warnings and sexism related at all?
Okay, I'm almost done with my very tired rant.
Please make more videos, Laci. Your arguments are so easy to demolish.